LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the April 24th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be showing you the dozen best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the video title, the main topic is Donald Trump versus Joe Biden rematch in 2024 that nobody wants, which actually comes out of a new NBC News poll that I'll show you from Meet the Press that shows something like just 5% of Americans want a Donald Trump versus Joe Biden rematch. Now, some large number don't want Biden to run, and he's expected to announce this Tuesday, tomorrow, which is the 4-year anniversary of when he announced in 2019 that he was running for 2020. Now he's going to announce tomorrow, according to reports. And so that was one of the main topics. And then Donald Trump is doing really well in the Republican primary, even though he's even less popular than Joe Biden. So I'll be covering that with most of the clips. There are a couple other issues that come up in the news summaries I may talk about briefly. The evacuation of embassy personnel, U.S. embassy personnel over the weekend from Khartoum, Sudan, although I hear there's breaking news that there's a ceasefire there. And then I also heard breaking news today that Tucker Carlson's out at Fox News, which is not really covered at all anywhere in any of my clips because that just broke today, and I didn't take any clips on that breaking news. But for my political comedy, oh, and one other, I will talk about the follow-up on the abortion issue. I've been talking the last couple weeks, and I will even show you a prediction. My second clip I'm going to show you is what you would have learned if you watched my show last week about what the Supreme Court was going to do this last week, which I correctly predicted, even though there were some caveats and stuff. But before I get to that, there is a political comedy clip from last Tuesday. This case settled between Fox News and Dominion voting machines. And it was a huge settlement, over $250 million Fox News paid out. That may have something to do with Tucker Carlson no longer being at Fox News, although I saw an article from the LA Times earlier today that it may have more to do with his support of the January 6th insurrectionists, and especially this whole Ray Epps conspiracy theory that government agents were actually the ones who were fomenting the breaking into the Capitol, which Tucker Carlson has apparently there's another lawsuit against Fox News and Tucker Carlson from Ray Epps about that. This guy who they keep saying is the government agent responsible for January 6th. And anyway, that is not anything I'm really covering, but I am covering for my political comedy Jake Tapper's reaction to the settlement between Fox News and Dominion, where he tries to read the statement from Fox News and keep from laughing, and pretty much fails. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
So we just heard from lawyers representing Dominion Voting Systems after the company settled with Fox. The attorney, Justin Nelson, announced the deal. It's a really unbelievable figure. Fox is going to pay Dominion Voting Systems $787,500,000. Dominion's lawyer saying, quote, today represents a ringing endorsement for truth and for democracy. Fox trying to put a positive face on what can only be interpreted as one of the ugliest and most embarrassing moments in the history of journalism. Fox issued a statement saying, quote, we are pleased to have reached a settlement of our dispute with Dominion Voting Systems. We acknowledge the court's rulings finding certain claims about Dominion to be false. The settlement reflects, I'm sorry, this is going to be difficult to say with a straight face. This settlement reflects Fox's continued commitment to the highest journalistic standards. We are hopeful that our We are hopeful that our decision to resolve the dispute with Dominion amicably instead of the acrimony of a divisive trial allows the country to move forward from these issues. Unquote. Let's bring back CNN legal analyst Laura Cook.
I thought that was pretty amusing. I don't know if you followed that coverage, but I don't know. Should Jake Tapper have been able to read I mean, I guess his face was commenting, was making the commentary that he couldn't, as a CNN journalist, give, or I don't know. That you can let me know what you think about whether that was that. Was that political bias from the CNN anchor there, Jake Tapper, or was that just recognizing the irony of the moment? You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And I am going to get to the main topic and the news summaries, but I do want to preview the final clip. Down in the video description, I've not only under sources have I put links to where I get all of the clips from, all the major media outlets, but I also, under media mentioned, I give brief summaries of each of the clips. And if you look all the way at the end, clip 13, I said there were a dozen clips, but that's because the next clip I'm showing is a clip of me from last week. It's not from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, as I like to say. But no, the clip 13, if you look at the list, is Lindsey Graham being cross-examined by Dana Bash, not very well. And this is like an ongoing series. I think, is this the third or the fourth week in a row that, I think it's the third week in a row. No, it's either the third or the fourth week in a row that I've had Lindsey Graham poorly cross-examined by, I, I think he might be going through all five of the big five corporate outlets. And I will explain to you again why. And Lindsey Graham, like, while he's getting away with not being well cross-examined, he actually attacks Dana Bash for not cross-examining the Democrats well enough. And she spends a lot of her time like defending herself, which may be why she doesn't do a good job. And that's on the abortion issue. And I'll talk about what the Supreme Court did at that point a little bit too when I get to that final clip. But I also, as I promised before the last clip, I wanted to show you the good information, the good prediction you would have gotten from me if you were watching last week's show. I know many of my live viewers were also here last week. I don't often make predictions, and to be honest, this prediction was kind of couched in some caveats. If you watch the full context, I went through all 9 of the Supreme Court justices and said, which two. I said it would likely be a 7-2 decision, which, as far as we know, because these types of shadow docket decisions don't necessarily give the vote count, but there are only 2 known dissents, and they're the 2 I predicted last week, as you can see in this 30 seconds from last week's show over here. I actually think there's a good chance even this, conservative, 6-3 conservative Supreme Court may even rule 7-2. I don't know if they're going to do it on Wednesday or if they're going to delay it or what the procedure is going to be, but I think there are only 2 sure votes to uphold what the radical Trump judge did. That's Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito. I think they're the most radical, especially on abortion on the Supreme Court. So, a good thing I'm wearing a different shirt, or you wouldn't even be able to tell that was from last week. Well, I don't know. I had to do a live stream at an ACLU event over the weekend, and I had to disassemble and reassemble my whole setup here. So I don't know if I got everything framed exactly the same, but you can compare last week to this week and see how I did. But I'm kind of proud of myself for getting that prediction correct, because, in fact, it was, as far as we know, a 7-2 decision with Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito being the 2, where the Supreme Court stayed both the Fifth Circuit and the radical Trump judge from Amarillo, Texas, Matthew Kacsmaryk, who were trying to stop the most abortions in the United States are done using these abortion pills, mifepristone and mifepristone and misoprostol, or as they call it, miso. And it looked like there might be a ban on mifepristone. But mifepristone will continue to be available. It'll go up through the full panel of the Fifth Circuit and may probably make it back to the Supreme Court. Maybe they won't take it, but that's where that stands for the moment. And that was reported on in several of the news summaries, along with the Joe Biden versus Donald Trump 2024 race shaping up and the evacuation of the embassy in Khartoum, Sudan. I'm going to show you all 5 of the corporate news summaries from longest to shortest. The longest one this week is actually Martha Raddatz with their reporter James Longman, who is in Sudan, giving a longer report on that. But you'll see Martha Raddatz also talks about the Supreme Court ruling on mifepristone, and I'll talk about that news summary a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. The high-stakes legal battle over access to a widely used abortion pill in the U.S. is on hold for now, after the Supreme Court on Friday preserved access to the drug while a lawsuit over its approval works its way through the courts. We'll have much more on that story later this morning, but we begin with breaking news overnight: a dramatic military operation in Africa to rescue U.S. diplomats and their families from the war-torn capital of Sudan. Nearly 100 people were airlifted from the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum under the cover of darkness and with the protection of more than 100 U.S. Special Operations Forces. 3 Chinook helicopters were on the ground in Sudan for less than an hour before flying the Americans across the border to Ethiopia. President Biden announced the successful operation in a statement and promised to help the thousands of Americans still in the country to the extent possible as Sudan slips further into chaos after 9 days of ferocious fighting. ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman leads us off.
This morning, a major sigh of relief as all personnel from the U.S. Embassy in Khartoum and their families have been safely evacuated from Sudan.
As a result of the intensity of the conflict, we reluctantly decided it was time to suspend operations.
U.S. Special Operations Forces making the daring rescue operation under the cover of darkness. The Pentagon saying 3 Chinook helicopters took off from a U.S. base in Djibouti and refueled in Ethiopia, flying 800 miles to the Sudanese capital. On the ground for less than an hour, they rescued fewer than 100 people, including Americans and other nationals. President Biden praising the, quote, unmatched skill of the 100 or so Special Forces members involved. Leaders across the world scrambling to pull their nationals out of Sudan amid days of fighting and a shaky ceasefire, leaving only a small window of opportunity. Saudi Arabia releasing this footage, showing their first group of foreign nationals were safely evacuated and they're back on Saudi soil. The fighting between the 2 warring military groups has only escalated as it enters its 2nd week. It's already claimed at least 400 lives, including 1 American. The Biden administration has been warning private American citizens about the danger, saying they can't count on the U.S. government to get them out.
So it is not our standard procedure to evacuate American citizens living abroad.
And that's the focus now, Martha, figuring out how to get other U.S. citizens out of the country. One option is Port Sudan. It is on the Red Sea, and other countries have used it to get their citizens out. The issue is that it is some 500 miles away from Khartoum, and it is too dangerous right now to leave your house, let alone the city. It is worth repeating, 16,000 Americans are still thought stranded in Sudan. Martha?
James Longman, thanks. Let's bring in our ABC military analyst, Colonel Steve Ganyard. And Steve, I know you've...
And I'm not going to show you the military analyst, just the reporter, and I'll follow that same practice when I get to the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, which is the shortest one. And I thought I had these arranged from longest to shortest, but I guess actually NBC News Meet the Press with Chuck Todd had the longest news summary, and it was mostly on this new NBC News poll, and that's which they've been talking about all day on Fox News because they like the results that show Biden as a weak candidate going into 2024, in that he has fairly low approval ratings, and like 60, 65, 68%, I guess. I think it might be somewhere in the mid to high 60% of voters don't want him to run again, although it's also fairly high for Donald Trump. And keep that in mind when we get to the Fox News Sunday stuff, because they really emphasize the weakness of Biden, but not the weakness of Trump. And they're both really weak in the NBC News poll, which, I don't know, is that really the most important issue? That I always criticize the corporate news media for making their top story their new poll, which polls don't really mean that much, especially way out here in April 2023 for the November 2024 election. But anyway, I will talk about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which also talks about the abortion ruling in the Supreme Court briefly as it relates to polling. It's good for Democrats because there are a lot more single issue pro-choice voters than anti-abortion voters, which is a fairly new phenomenon. And anyway, I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that longest of the news summaries together over here.
Good Sunday morning. Americans are seething at their political leaders and at each other. That's according to a brand new NBC News poll we are releasing right now. They're dissatisfied with what seems to be inevitable, a 2024 rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. As Biden prepares to formally announce his campaign for a second term early this week, just 1 in 4 Americans believe he should run for re-election. 70% say he shouldn't run. By the way, only 35% believe Donald Trump should run again. 60% say no. Only 5% of Americans actually want both of these gentlemen to run. And let me show you even more of this poll. 53% of 2020 Biden voters say he shouldn't run. 64% of Democrats who voted for Sanders or Warren in the 2020 primaries think he shouldn't run. And 76% of voters under 35 think he shouldn't run. And what's the top concern for that? We asked voters. We didn't prompt them. We said, why don't you think he should run? Well, these were the responses. It almost is all about his age and his ability to do the job. Again, these are among Democratic primary voters. Overall, the president's job rating is not in a good place when you're seeking re-election, sitting at just 41%, driven by the 58% of Americans who disapprove of how he is handling the economy right now. Just 30% of independents approve of the job Biden is doing overall. But as Biden is fond of saying, he is not to be judged by the almighty, but judge him by the alternative. And guess what? The alternative is even more unpopular among the American public. Let me show you here. Here's the feelings about Donald Trump. Just 1 in 3 Americans have positive feelings about him. A majority have negative feelings, sitting at 53%. Among voters overall, a majority believe that the charges in New York are serious enough because he should be held to the same standard as anyone else. 43% believe he's being unfairly targeted, and that's approximately the number that seems to stick behind Donald Trump on almost anything. And among Republican voters, it appears that the New York indictment only galvanized his support. We asked them whether these charges were politically motivated attack and it means they've got to stand behind Donald Trump, or do these charges indicate that he's got a lot of distractions in his way and that it's important to nominate somebody else who can focus on beating Joe Biden? Well, as you can see here, it's no contest. Nearly 70% believe they've got to rally around Donald Trump right now because of these indictments. Only 1 in 4 Republican voters believe it is time to move on. And that translates into the Republican primary matchup here. Donald Trump with 46%. Now, look, Ron DeSantis, that's a healthy number for somebody that's never run for president before. It's about the same spot that Barack Obama started in against Hillary Clinton back in 2007. And when you combine first and second choice here, you see that Trump and DeSantis could very well end up in a neck-and-neck race here. But that's the point. Donald Trump seems to be as strong, if not stronger, with the groups that matter the most when it comes to winning a Republican primary. Now, there's one more major takeaway from this poll. As the Supreme Court keeps the abortion pill mifepristone available for now, putting a stay on the Texas ruling, which revoked FDA approval for the drug, abortion is energizing voters. Nearly 60%, as you can see here, of voters want abortion access to remain legal. And among, ready for this, among the 43% who told us that abortion is the single issue that drives them to the polls, They believe it should be legal by a 65-34% margin. This is another sign that the energy is on the Democratic side of this issue after Dobbs. When Roe v. Wade was law of the land, single-issue abortion voters almost universally leaned Republican. 2024 Republican hopefuls met in their first Iowa cattle call last night, courting the caucus's most important demographic, religious voters. Donald Trump didn't appear at the event. He sent a video claiming credit for the Supreme Court justices he appointed, while his former vice president took Donald Trump on the issue of abortion.
I face down vile attacks to confirm our three great Supreme Court justices, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett.
I do think it's more likely that this issue is resolved at the state level, but I don't agree with the former president who says this is a states-only issue.
And joining me now is the Republican governor of New Hampshire. It's Chris Sununu.
And I will have a clip of that Chris Sununu interview where we see how that Republican tries to take on Trump. I kind of disagree with what Chuck Todd said there about Mike Pence, that he was taking on Donald Trump by saying that he said, I disagree with Donald Trump that it's a states-only issue. But that's not really taking on Donald Trump. In fact, I'm going to show a clip of Mike Pence refusing to say anything really negative about Trump and his position that abortion should be decided at the state level. In clip number 11, that's Robert Costa of CBS on CBS News' Face the Nation. I'll get to there. But the really important thing to remember about that NBC News summary from Chuck Todd. I already criticized making the poll the most important news story, and I don't know why that poll was so important, but it did make news, and like I said, especially on Fox News. But remember this screenshot from that news summary. Should they run in 2024? 70% say Biden shouldn't run, but 60% say Trump shouldn't run. And you heard also the statement from Chuck Todd about their poll in that news summary that basically was the basis for the title of this video, that, well, it's not nobody wants, it's not the rematch that nobody wants, but it's the rematch that only 5%. Only 5% of Americans apparently want Biden and Trump to run to get against each other in 2024. But now I'm going to show you the Fox News Sunday news summary, and they talk briefly about the evacuation of U.S. embassy staff in Sudan, but then they talk mostly about Biden's expected announcement this week that he's running for re-election, and they really emphasize the weakness of Biden, and they don't really talk about, and they make Trump look strong because he's looking strong in the Republican primary, because Republican primary voters are, in large part insane. A large swath of the Republican base is like divorced from reality in terms of what happened in the 2020 election and what kind of person Donald Trump is, or like whether he is fit to be president. I mean, how anyone after the last 6 years could think that Donald Trump is fit to be president is beyond me, but maybe someone in the comments section would like to try to explain it while we watch Fox News Sunday give that Fox News spin, where they do talk about, the weakness of Biden, but not so much the weakness of Trump over in this clip.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. We begin with breaking news. Early this morning, U.S. Special Forces rushed to evacuate American embassy staff from Sudan's capital. The Pentagon says the operation was fast and clean. Service members spent less than an hour on the ground. The evacuation comes amid a week of bloody battles between Sudan's army and a paramilitary group. This is video of an airstrike in Khartoum, Sudan, amid heavy fighting between the warring factions. Violence continuing this weekend despite a declared truce. We will continue to bring you updates. But back here in Washington, the will he or won't he debate may finally be over for Democrats. President Biden expected to announce this week that he is going to run again. It clarifies the central question now for Democrats: do they want him for a second term? And it clarifies the stakes for Republicans as they gear up to choose their nominee over the next year. In a moment, Governor Asa Hutchinson joins me. He has said he will announce he's running in the Republican Party, going straight at former President Trump. But first, let's turn to Lucas Tomlinson live at the White House for the new details on what Biden's announcement could look like. Lucas.
Shannon, the president plans to make it official on Tuesday with the release of a pre-recorded video message announcing he's running for re-election. The planning ramped up in earnest after his return from Ireland, with the DNC launching a bevy of calls to top Democratic donors and a summit planned.
I'm not going to talk about what 2024 is going to look like. I'm not going to talk about that from here.
The White House is mum on the president's plans, but his announcement has been months in the making.
Our intention is to run again.
However, a new poll from the Associated Press says 73% of Americans do not want him to run again, including a majority of Democrats. But Democrats by and large say they're likely to vote for him if he's the nominee. The president faces two declared Democrat challengers, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who announced last week and is polling at 14%.
It's like running against somebody in your family. I think I'm in a much better position to beat Donald Trump than Joe Biden.
Writer Marianne Williamson, who made it to the debate stage in 2020, is also challenging Biden. The president's announcement comes the same week his son Hunter's lawyers are scheduled to meet with the Justice Department. On the Republican side, former President Trump continues to lead in the polls. A new Wall Street Journal Republican poll has him leading potential rival Ron DeSantis 51 to 38%. It's a reversal from 4 months ago when DeSantis was ahead. Trump has received endorsements from nearly a dozen Republican Florida congressmen.
If Governor DeSantis runs, he's not likely to announce his candidacy until after the Florida legislative session ends, which is about 2 weeks away. Shannon?
All right, Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House. Lucas, thank you very much. Joining us now, former Republican governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson.
And I will have a clip of former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson and Shannon Bream's questioning of him that comes right there. But I'm going to do it as a contrast because they have a Democrat on, Representative Debbie Dingell on, and you'll see Shannon Bream ask Debbie Dingell about the weakness of Biden when he's announcing for re-election. And then when they talk to Asa Hutchinson, they ask him about the strength of Trump. He's like strong as a buzzsaw or whatever. And it's kind of a bogus comparison because, I think they've been playing up the candidacy of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Fox News lately and saying he's entering the race with 14%. But I think Biden has the overwhelming majority of, it's Robert F. Kennedy and Marianne Williamson are his opponents, but there's not really a question. He's much stronger in the primaries than even Trump is. But for Biden, they talk about the weakness of Biden in the general election. They don't talk about the weakness of Trump in the general election, just his strength in the primaries, even though Biden's stronger in the primaries than Trump is. But anyway, I'll get to that when I get to the newsmaker clips after I show you the last two news summaries, which are both fairly brief. First, Dana Bash on CNN's State of the Union. You'll see here talking both about Biden's expected announcement tomorrow that he's running for re-election and the Supreme Court ruling keeping access to mifepristone and the evacuation of the U.S. Embassy staff in Sudan. So actually the CNN State of the Union news summary, I think, covers more news in a little over a minute than the 4.5-minute NBC News Meet the Press news summary that was mostly focused on ephemeral polling results. But You can let me know what you think after. Is this the best of the news summaries? Because it's got all the top news stories all rolled into a minute and 8 seconds over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is beginning to feel a lot like 2024. President Biden is preparing to officially announce his re-election bid as soon as Tuesday, 4 years from when he announced his last bid for the White House. The long-expected announcement comes as his administration is celebrating a win, even if a potentially temporary one, on abortion. After the Supreme Court moved to protect access to the abortion pill, mifepristone, prompting praise from Democrats and mostly crickets from Republicans. The battle over abortion is shaping up to be a key campaign issue as the 2024 field comes into focus. We're also following breaking news this morning. Late last night, President Biden announced American diplomats and their families were safely evacuated by helicopter from Sudan's capital, Khartoum. It came amid escalating violence between Sudanese military and a paramilitary group. The Biden administration is coordinating with Americans still in Sudan, but making it clear a broader evacuation is off the table. Joining me now, a top Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Lindsey Graham of South Carolina.
And like I said at the beginning, I will have a clip of Lindsey Graham getting hostile with Dana Bash on the abortion issue. Like you don't hold the Democrats accountable, even though she's not holding Lindsey Graham accountable for his multiple misstatements on the abortion issue. But that's the final clip 13, when I get there. But like I said before I showed the clip, that might be the best of the news summaries, just because it got all the top stories in the shortest period of time. The last news summary is even shorter. CBS News Face the Nation, but it focuses mainly on the evacuation of U.S. Embassy staff in Sudan, and then they go to their military analyst, which, as I mentioned when I cut away from the military analyst on ABC, that I was going to cut away from the military analyst on CBS because it's not reporters, it's pundits, and I don't want to be doing punditry on pundits, but actually I do that sometimes, but it's just so meta. I'll be doing that on clip 12, and I apologize in advance for doing it, but I'll explain why when I get there. But here's the CBS News Face the Nation news summary that we can watch for the final news summary together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We begin with a daring Special Forces rescue operation to get American diplomats out of Sudan, where fighting continues as two top generals there jockey for power. The State Department says security conditions aren't expected to improve anytime soon and has temporarily suspended operations at the U.S. Embassy in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Meanwhile, there are still hundreds of American citizens stranded in Sudan, where the airports have been closed for days. For more now, we turn to national security correspondent David Martin. David, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, and that's like their military analyst, not a reporter on the scene like Longman. No, James Longman was for the report that I showed earlier from ABC. They had James Longman. Actually, was he in Sudan? He was their foreign correspondent. I don't know if he was actually reporting from Sudan. Probably not. But anyway, that was the last of the news summaries. I said that I thought the CNN one was the best for reasons I already gave. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. Now I'm going to move on to the newsmaker clips. The first two, this is the Fox News bias juxtaposition I promised you earlier, where first I'm going to show you the question that Shannon Bream asks the Democrat Debbie Dingell about the weakness of Biden as he's announcing for re-election. But then when Shannon Bream talks to Asa Hutchinson, who's running against Donald Trump, she asks him about the strength of Donald Trump. Well, I don't know if you think of a buzzsaw as something that's strong, which I don't think is much of a interpretive leap. But anyway, first, and you'll see what I mean about buzzsaw when we get to the second clip, but here is the weakness of Biden as the premise for talking to Democrats on Fox News with Shannon Bream talking to Debbie Dingell over here.
Within a few days, President Biden is expected to officially announce a re-election campaign. He's already facing two Democratic challengers, and polls show there is a relatively negative view of the job he's done so far. Joining me now to discuss, Democratic Congresswoman from Michigan, Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning, Shannon. Good to be with you.
Okay, so you know that, listen, when we talk about approval ratings by an average of 11 points, the president is underwater there. We've got polling out of key early states like New Hampshire, where half of the Democratic primary voters there say don't run. The AP, 73% of people say they don't want him to run again. How worried are you about a potential lack of enthusiasm on the 24 election for this president, and should he give someone else a chance?
I'm not worried at all. You will remember who you were talking to. I'm someone that does not believe in polls. They're a snapshot in time. I told all of you in 2016 that I thought Donald Trump could win, and then that Donald Trump was going to win. And even on election night, I was debating whether he was going to win on headlines, and I was right. So, you know, when I'm out there, I'm talking to people. And I'm in communities, and you don't know who he's going to be running against. In the Midwest, people think Joe Biden understands their challenges. They think that he's someone that cares. And when we are in the midst of a campaign, I think you will see strong enthusiasm and passion for the outcome of the election next year.
So one of the things he's got to deal with here domestically, we were just talking about, is the debt ceiling. And he had said.
So actually, they talked about a real issue, the debt ceiling, that I'm not covering in this week's show, but probably sometime in the next month or two, because they're saying that the debt ceiling could run out sometime in June now. I will be covering that issue. But like I said, that was the Shannon Bream asking. I mean, it wasn't a bad question necessarily to ask a Democrat about the weakness of Biden going into his reelection, and Debbie Dingell had a good answer, I thought. But if Fox News was really journalistic, given that we saw in the NBC News poll, 70% think Biden shouldn't run, but 60% think Trump shouldn't run. And if you're like using the same metrics of general election candidates, we should be talking about the weakness of Trump. But you'll see here Shannon Bream, when talking to Republican Asa Hutchinson, talks about the strength of Trump. This is the buzzsaw quote that I promised earlier, and I'll talk about that clip a little more after we watch together over here.
Okay, so Governor, you have said there's no point in running unless you're going straight at former President Trump. You right now, though, in the polling are at 1% or less in all the recent polls. So going after him is like walking into a buzzsaw. Why are you doing it?
Well, because it's important. What America does not want is another repeat of 2020, where we have Joe Biden and Donald Trump running against each other. That's reflected in the polls, certainly on the Democrat side. And so we don't want to repeat that. It takes alternatives. I've got a great record of consistent conservatism as Arkansas governor, experience at the federal level. And while I come from a small state, it's a successful conservative state that has a booming economy, lower taxes. And so I'm running because I think that we need alternatives and we need new leadership and new direction in America.
Okay, we'll dig into some of those policy issues in just a second. But first, let me ask you this. President Trump has taken a lot of heat for hemming and hawing on whether he would pledge to actually support whomever the GOP nominee ends up being. Will you support the nominee if it's him?
Well, we've negotiated with the Republican National Committee on the terms of the debate. I expect to be on the debate stage. I don't prefer party loyalty oaths, but it's important to have the competition. I want to participate in the debate, so I'll see exactly what that pledge is, but I expect to be on the debate stage.
Okay, we will see you there. All right, you could be facing also on that debate stage Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. You've been critical about, as have others, him getting involved as a conservative in direct corporate affairs and business, as he has with Disney.
And I don't know, Fox News seems to be souring on DeSantis now that he doesn't seem to be doing that well against Trump, but you saw there that they started off with the whole buzz, taking on Trump is like taking on a buzzsaw because he is such a fighter, unlike the weak, ineffective Joe Biden or whatever. And Then Shannon Bream's only real follow-up there to Asa Hutchinson, who doesn't seem like a great candidate to take on Trump, if you ask my opinion, but you can give me your opinion or whatever. But the only follow-up was like, let's keep the Republican Party united, whoever ends up being the nominee. Let's all pledge to support Trump. And even if Trump pledged to support the nominee to get in the debates, does anyone really think Trump would keep a pledge? There's anything that would make Trump keep such a pledge? Like, he's such an honest person. I mean, that's one of the many reasons he's not really fit to be president, as I was talking about earlier. But anyway, you can tell me what you think about the juxtaposition between Shannon Bream's questioning of Debbie Dingell versus Asa Hutchinson, one of which was denigrating Biden, the other was building up Trump. But if you think Asa Hutchinson isn't going to do a great job of taking down Donald Trump and being a better Republican presidential candidate, I'm going to give you two more options here. First, Chris Sununu, and then Mike Pence, both of whom are sort of taking on Donald Trump. I mean, Chris Sununu maybe does the best job, but he like barely says that Trump lost the 2020 election, although he like sticks it in really quickly at one point in his answer here to the follow-up from Chuck Todd, which for Chuck Todd's Chuck Todd's ability to ask follow-up questions, he actually asks a follow-up question of Chris Sununu here that shows he was listening to what he said and he thought of something to follow up based on what he said, which is, one of Chuck Todd's greatest weaknesses is, his prepared questions are usually good, and he's thought out a lot of good questions, and that also has to do with his producers, but he's not so good at like listening to what the person's saying and then asking a follow-up question based on what he just heard. But he does that here, and kind of gets an answer from Chris Sununu about Republicans not believing Trump lost in 2020, and I'll talk about all of that a little more after we watch that Chuck Todd interview with New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who may be a rival of Trump. He's undeclared at this point, but may take on Trump. Could he win? Well, actually, the answer is no, and you'll hear why at the very end. If you listen all the way to the end of this clip, you'll hear why Chris Sununu will never be the Republican presidential nominee, and I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the clip together over here.
Look, the last time you were on, and on many a program, you have made one declaration almost universal about 2024. Let me play a montage.
Look, Donald Trump is not going to be the nominee, right? We're just moving on as a party, as a country. He's not going to be the nominee. That's just not going to happen. Here's the good news. I'm going to give you the good news. Ready? I love you. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
But you're dead wrong. He's not going to be the nominee.
All those quotes were from February and March, none of them from April. You've seen the numbers. You've seen this shift. You've seen the energy. We've watched Governor DeSantis. What say you now?
Yeah, there's definitely a shift, but I still don't think he's necessarily going to be the nominee. Look, I think your poll is spot on in all these areas, by the way. I think that's actually a great poll, and I hope folks listen to it. I'll say this. Republicans are rallying. They're supporting former President Trump over these indictments, right? And there's a lot of support there. Now, does it actually translate into a vote? We will see. I mean, most folks don't decide who they're voting for until about 3 weeks before the election. So there's a lot of politics to play out. There's not even a single debate has been had. Other candidates are going to get in the race. So I just think it's so far away. And at the end of the day, we want a winner, right? Republicans want someone who can win in November of 24. Donald Trump is a loser. He has not just lost once. He lost us in our House seats in 2018. He lost everything in 20. We should have 54 U.S. senators right now. We don't because of his message. So Donald Trump is positioning himself to be a four-time loser in 2024. We need candidates that can win.
Isn't the problem, though, that a majority of Republicans don't believe what you just said, that he lost in 2020? Because the loser message should work unless you don't believe he lost.
Well, it's not just 2020, right? We got crushed in 2022. We should have 54 U.S. Senate seats. We don't, because he is part of that message. We lost in 2018. So it's not just about whether he won or lost in 20, which he did, of course, but it's really about we can complain about things, or we can make sure that, you know, you can't govern if you don't win. And again, so he drags that ticket down. I think that reality is going to really come to bear through the primary process. So I understand folks are supporting him. They think that a lot of this stuff with the DA is political, which I believe it is too, by the way. It's creating a lot of sympathy. He's playing the victim card, right? Believe it or not, former President Trump is now playing the victim card, and he's making some headway with it. But at the end of the day, it has to turn into votes. Look, I talk all the time about, you know, we want a fighter, right? Republicans want someone that's going to fight for them. But we also want a fighter that can win. He said he was going to go to Washington and drain the swamp. He didn't do it. He said he was going to build a wall and secure things. He didn't do it. He said he was going to give us health care reform and be fiscally disciplined, not add $8 trillion to the debt. He didn't do any of those things. So we want fighters that can actually win and take accountability.
Look, I will bring up the good news for you in your potential candidacy. The Republican voters who don't want Trump to run look like voters that would be inclined to support you. They look like New Hampshire Republicans, if you will. They're more educated, wealthier. They're more likely to identify as moderates. But here's the problem. They only represent 26% of all Republicans. How do you appeal to that Trump supporter who's a bit motivated by grievance?
Sure. Well, look, I'm a very principled free market conservative, right? When you look at whether the Second Amendment, we're the best in the country, with personal freedoms, we need to remind ourselves as Republicans what we're really good at. Limited government, local control, low taxes, individual responsibility. That's something that everybody can rally around. And frankly, in New Hampshire, as we say, we're wicked good at. We're wicked good at that. So when you look at the candidates that are on the ground and results driven, I'll put my record of success behind against almost any other candidate that would potentially step on the stage. And so results-driven winners is really what is going to drive the voter. We're still a long way away, again, from what the issues of the voter are going to be.
But if you pulled this off, if you became the nominee, you would defy a conventional wisdom that has been true now frankly, for 50 years. And that is, if you're an abortion rights supporter, you don't have much of a chance to win the Republican nomination.
And there you have it. Chris Sununu will not be the Republican nominee because he's pro-choice. Pro-choice Republican cannot win. And in fact, one of the things that seems to be happening in the Republican primary that's just in its beginning stages is like fight to move as far to the right as possible on abortion to win the Republican nomination. You'll see that in this next clip I'm going to show you from Mike Pence. I think Ron DeSantis getting the 6-week abortion ban signed in Florida was also about his possible decision to run, and that protects him from an attack from his right on the abortion issue. But no, there will not be a pro-choice Republican nominee, which is why Governor Chris Sununu will not be the Republican nominee. He did take on Trump a little more strong. You heard him call Trump a loser. He sort of said that Trump lost the election. There was one point where he said, the question of whether he won or lost the 2020 election, which he did, which was a little ambiguous, but I think actually Chris Sununu at other times has said that Trump lost, and it's a fact, and that's an important thing for some Republicans somewhere to say, and it's something also Asa Hutchinson has said, I believe. But anyway, the next Republican I want to show you, kind of the last Republican, I'm going to show you a ABC panel discussion where they discuss both DeSantis and the possibility of Chris Christie, who's usually on the ABC panel, taking on Donald Trump. But like I said, you saw Chris Sununu call Trump a loser. You're not going to hear that from Mike Pence. He won't call him immoral, won't call him wrong. He may disagree with Trump, and he won't even barely say that, talking to Robert Costa about whether abortion is a state's a state level issue or a moral issue that should also be taken care of at the federal level, which is what Mike Pence apparently believes. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that CBS News Face the Nation clip together over here.
Very big right now in the Republican Party. There's a real debate. You're close to the Susan B. Anthony list. Its leader, anti-abortion activist Marjorie Dannenfelser, has said that anyone who takes former President Trump's position that states should decide what happens on abortion, she has called that a morally indefensible position. Do you agree?
Well, my view is that the cause of restoring the sanctity of life to the center of American law is the calling of our time. The Supreme Court in the Dobbs decision last June gave the American people a new beginning for life. It returned the question of abortion to states and to the American people, but it didn't just return it exclusively to the states. And that's where I disagree with the former president. This isn't a states-only decision. We have elected representatives in the Congress of the United States, and we'll elect a president again in 2024. And I think the American people would welcome a minimum national standard in Washington, D.C., 15 weeks, that's supported by more than 65% of the American public. But the reality is this will likely be sorted out on a state-by-state basis in the legislative process. But I believe those of us that want to see the cause of the sanctity of life advanced, and the millions of Americans who support the cause of life want to see leaders at every level, local, state, and federal, that are standing for life in every way.
Is former President Trump in retreat on the abortion front?
Well, I'd leave that to others.
What's your take?
You can ask him.
Your top aide, Mark Short, has said on the record, former President Trump is in retreat.
Well, look, that's a great question for him. I couldn't be more proud to have been vice president in the administration that appointed 3 of the justices to the Supreme Court, that sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history. And so I'll always be grateful for the president's decision in appointing those justices to the court, and for the pro-life stance that we took throughout our administration. But Robert, now we're in a new season, and I think millions of pro-life Americans want to see us seize every opportunity to put the interests of the unborn first, and also in equal measure to demonstrate the generosity and compassion of the American people toward women who've been caught up in abortion in the last 50 years, and women who find themselves in a crisis pregnancy today. That, to me, is the key going forward, is if we stand on principle, we stand for the sanctity of human life, which I believe the unalienable right to life, it's enshrined in our founding documents. But beyond that, we've just got to show the generosity and compassion of the American people in new and renewed ways. States that are passing new restrictions on abortion are doing that, and I welcome that, and I think it's a pathway toward winning hearts and minds in the future.
You just spoke at the National Rifle Association.
Yeah, that's how compassionate he is. He just spoke at the NRA in favor of gun rights when there have been all these mass shootings and accidental killings, and that was an issue that was covered on some of the Sunday morning news analysis shows, like the kid who knocked on the wrong door and got shot. Was that in Cleveland? I can't remember. And then there have been all these made a wrong turn type shootings. There was the cheerleaders in Texas, I think, who got into the wrong car, and then there was some kid and her father were shot by someone when their basketball rolled into the yard, and they went. There's all these weird shootings going on, but I guess that's the compassion of the Republican Party, and that's what's really ridiculous. Mike Pence is trying to say that the rules where government officials decide on your health care, especially for women, make their reproductive choices for them rather than letting them do it with in consultation with their physicians. That's compassionate, even though we see like all the terrible outcomes where like women aren't able to get abortions when they have like stillborn babies and they have to like take them to term and deliver dead babies because Republicans won't let them get like health care, normal health care. There was like, was it a 10-year-old who was raped in Indiana, had to go to Ohio, or Ohio, I can't remember what the states were anymore, and couldn't get an abortion because of the stupid laws the Republicans are passing that are not compassionate. How Mike Pence can frame them as compassionate is beyond me. The harm to women that has already occurred just from the overruling of Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs decision and all these ridiculous laws that have been passed in like about half of the states. And, women are suffering. And for Mike Pence to call that compassionate, I don't know where he gets that. But you also saw like how weak he is taking on his former boss, Donald Trump. He disagreed with Trump. That was like but he wouldn't say his position was immoral like this Susan B. Anthony group is saying. He wouldn't, he was proud to be in the Trump administration that ended up on January 6th with a Trump-inspired mob chanting "Hang Mike Pence" that put him and his family in danger. But he is just way too weak on taking on Donald Trump. And the chance of him being the nominee, the Republican, at least he's pro-life. He's like moving to the right of Donald Trump's, but I don't think that's going to get him the nomination. You can let me know what you think in the comment section. And then this next clip was, even though ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos with their host this last weekend, Martha Raddatz, they had on a couple newsmakers, did not really ask them about my main topic of the Trump versus Biden 2024 rematch that nobody wants or whatever, but they did talk about it in the panel discussion with former Heidi Heitkamp. She's from, was it North Dakota, Montana? I can't remember. She's from one of those like upper plain states, I think, Heidi Heitkamp. And they also have Sarah Isker and Mariana Sotomayor, all talking both about the problems with Biden's age. Martha Raddatz starts off this clip doing like a Fox News imitation. This is what I expect on Fox News, where they're always like quoting the New York Post or the Wall Street Journal or other things that Rupert Murdoch owns, but and then they never say it's owned by the same company. Martha Raddatz doesn't have to say that because ABC is owned by Disney, where they discuss Ron DeSantis and also possibly Chris Christie as people who could take on Donald Trump. I promised a discussion of Chris Christie in this clip and the weakness of Biden because he's an octogenarian or whatever. And I will talk about that clip a little more after we watch it together over here.
To that point, Heidi, the Wall Street Journal editorial board had a very strong statement about it, saying the public understands what Mr. Biden apparently won't admit, that electing an octogenarian in obvious decline for another 4 years could be an historic mistake. It's impossible to know Mr. Biden's real physical and mental state because the White House goes to great lengths to hide it, but his decline is clear to anyone who isn't willfully blind.
Absolutely. And the real issue here is when you don't compare Biden to, the perfect candidate. You compare him to who the likely nominee is. And I think that there's a comfort level as we move into this that Donald Trump probably will be the nominee. This will be a repeat of 2020. Biden has a lot of things to run on. He's done a lot of good policy things that both progressives and moderate Republicans seems like. And so I think there isn't going to be a lot of opposition within the Democratic Party. But I also think that the attention that we're going to see Democrats expose is these false lines among the Republicans. So, I mean, you know, there is going to be this question, right? And rightfully so. But I think when you look at what the administration has in fact accomplished in the last 4 years, it's pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive record. And so let's see how this plays out.
And Sarah, let's move on to the GOP side. This wasn't the greatest week for Ron DeSantis. Comes to D.C., a rare appearance, only to find that about half of the Republicans in Florida, or from Florida in Congress, are going for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that Joe Biden's team is making a smart decision in the sense that they want a replay of 2020, where he didn't really do much, say much, keep all the focus on Donald Trump and make it a referendum on Donald Trump. That worked really well for them last time. I have to say where I think they're making a mistake is assuming that Donald Trump is the weaker Republican candidate. Feels very Hillary Clinton, you know, trying to sort of egg on, this is our chosen candidate. Democrats, of course, have played in many Republican primaries so far in the last few years to try to pick their candidates. It is not clear to me at all that Donald Trump would be the weaker candidate against Joe Biden. As far as Ron DeSantis is concerned, I think Republicans, and this is true for Tim Scott and Nikki Haley and all of these guys, Donald Trump changed the scoring in Republican primaries. It's like we got rid of the three-pointer, and yet here are all these Republicans sitting at the three-point line making these difficult shots, and Donald Trump just says the thing. It's a dunking contest right now. Start dunking. Don't say you want a drama-free president, and then everyone, sitting on this round table is like, ooh, that was an attack on Donald Trump. No, say Donald Trump is a drama queen. Like, you need to actually bring it to Donald Trump if you want to beat him.
And to that point, Mariana, we have about 1 minute left. Chris Christie this week. Chris Christie is, of course, an ABC News contributor, often sits on this roundtable, but toying with the presidential run. He was at a New England college town hall this week and basically said, Donald Trump has failed us. Do you think that will resonate?
I mean, we have seen so many attacks against Trump, and it really hasn't. It seems like Christie's position is to just go in and constantly be saying these things. Maybe that could resonate in early states to some voters. But at the end of the day, in this kind of primary climate where we've seen Trump just again and again and again be underestimated and come out on top, I don't know.
Let me just say, it is very early. It is still April in 2022. We have a very long time to go. But thank you all for joining us. We're going to be talking about this for a very
Did Martha Raddatz lose any credibility with anybody there where she said it's April of 2022? Like, shouldn't, someone who is the anchor of the flagship ABC Sunday morning news analysis show know what year it is? I'm pretty sure, I can check here, but I'm pretty sure it's April 2023. No, whatever. I mean, people have a slip of the tongue, make mistakes. I'm sure Martha Raddatz knows what year it is, but that is kind of a big gaffe after she started that whole clip questioning octogenarian Joe Biden and his mental acuity, and then ends the clip not knowing what year it is. I have to say that. I like that sort of basketball analogy from Sarah Isker, and saying that, you have to call, Trump a drama queen, or Trump a failure, like apparently Chris Christie did, or a loser, like you saw from Chris Sununu. I mean, somebody's got to take Trump on. I think, like the title of my video says, it's most likely going to be Biden versus Trump, at least as we can see from this far away in April 2022, according to Martha Raddatz. No, it's April 2023, but it's still, pretty far away. That's still a year and 6.5 months before the election, because actually we're mostly through April of 2023. Anyway, and so I don't know, maybe Chris Christie, or is Chris Christie also pro-choice? I think Chris Christie is pro-choice. No, he is pro-life. He was pro-life and still elected in New Jersey. So maybe Chris Christie could take on. I mean, he was like Trump before Trump. He was like the loud, yelling, obnoxious, take on the media, take on the questioner guy before Trump even was. But he probably missed his moment. But anyway, you can let me know what you think in the comment section while I get to my last newsmaker clip. This is the one I promised you earlier. This is the ongoing series of, for some reason, nobody knows how to cross-examine Senator Lindsey Graham, even though he says like so many wrong things. And I'm going to kind of pre-criticize this clip because Lindsey Graham in here, first he says that Democrats want abortion on demand all the way up to birth. And it's true that a lot of Democratic bills allow abortion all the way up to birth, but not on demand. Abortion on demand means for any reason. And as I've been talking about with this issue for the last several weeks, most abortions are done by these abortion pills, mifepristone and misoprostol. That's, I think it's around 60%. It's definitely above 50%, close to 60% of abortions in the United States are done just by taking these pills. And the late term abortions, that's like 1%. And the reason those abortions are done is basically medical necessity. It means either the baby, and actually I have no problem calling it a baby after viability. That's a big dividing line for me, but I'm not going to go into all my abortion beliefs. But late term abortions are that 1% of abortions that occur in the late term are because the baby is dead, and that's so you do the abortion to avoid the stillbirth, or the baby has like really severe anomalies so that it's going to die sometime very soon after birth. So to avoid that whole thing, they do an abortion, or the baby is going to kill or severely injure the mother in the birthing process. Those are like basically the medical necessity only reasons that these late term abortions occur. And for Lindsey Graham to call that abortion on demand up till birth is ridiculous. He also says that a baby at 15 weeks has developed heart and lungs. Well, no, viability is basically 23 weeks. There might be some like late 22 weekers that can survive, but 15 weeks, lungs are not developed. That's why it's pre-viability. That viability was like a really important dividing line in Roe v. Wade, which Dana Bash kind of tries to bring up, but doesn't say anything about the developed heart and lungs, doesn't say anything about abortion on demand all the way up to birth. Oh, and I think he also talks about pain, that 15-week abortions is like a painful experience for like a baby getting dismembered. There's like no evidence of pain abortions at 15 weeks. That is also made up by Lindsey Graham. So I pretty much pre-criticized the clip, all the things Dana Bash lets Lindsey Graham get away with, because he like preemptively attacks her, and she's like all defending herself instead of cross-examining him like she should. But she's not the only one. I think this is either the third or fourth week in a row where Lindsey Graham gets away with all sorts of terrible misstatements about the facts without getting cross-examined, which I pretty much pre-criticized the clip, but I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that final newsmaker clip together over here.
Former President Donald Trump's campaign said this week that the Supreme Court got it right when they ruled abortion was a state issue. But here's what former Vice President Mike Pence said yesterday in Iowa.
I don't agree with the former president who says this is a states-only issue. I mean, we've been given a new beginning for life in this country. I think we have an opportunity to advance the sanctity of life, move it ever closer to the center of American law.
Senator, I've heard you say both on this issue, that it is a state issue, but now you do support a federal ban. So who's right here?
Right. Well, I've been supporting a limit on late-term abortions since 2015. I had a bill to limit abortions at 20 weeks with exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother. 70% of Americans support limiting abortion when the unborn child can feel pain. 50 of 53 European nations limit abortion at 15
But
weeks
my
or
question
less.
is it a federal issue or state?
Yeah, it's a human rights issue. Does it really matter where you're conceived? At 15 weeks, you have a developed heart and lungs, and to dismember a child at 15 weeks is a painful experience. It's barbaric. It's out of line with the rest of the civilized world. Only North Korea and China allow abortion on demand up to the moment of birth, except the Democratic Party. What the Democratic Party proposes on abortion is barbaric. Abortion up to the moment of birth, taxpayer funded.
Well,
I think is barbaric. I welcome this debate.
Well,
I think the Republican Party will be in good standing to oppose late-term abortion like most of the civilized world.
Just for the record, Roe went up to viability, but I just want to button this up.
No, quit covering for these guys. No. Your media, you keep covering for these guys. They introduced legislation that allowed abortion on demand with taxpayer-funded you paying for it, the taxpayer, up to the moment of birth. That was their position in Washington. That's the law they want to pass, and nobody in your business will talk about it. It's barbaric.
Senator, I'm not covering for anybody, and you know that. And when I have Democrats on, and I've had Democrats
just
on,
report the facts.
I have asked all of them about their position on where they believe this issue should be. My question for you, sir, is about President Trump, who you've endorsed to be president again. Is he right in saying that this issue should be a state's issue?
He said yesterday, I think at his speech in Iowa, that he opposes late-term abortion. Here's what I believe, that anybody running for president who has a snowball's chance in hell in the 2024 primary is going to be with me, the American people, and all of Europe saying late-term abortions should be off the table. 70% of the people oppose late-term abortions. I am confident over time that's where our nominee will be. I am confident that no Democrat will answer the question of when do you draw a line. They never get challenged. And I welcome this debate.
Okay.
I welcome this debate. Should we be like China and North Korea, or should we be like Europe when it comes to late-term abortion?
Okay, they do get challenged, but I want to move on to something that is very important to you, which is the Middle East. You recently returned from the Middle East. You met with the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Saudi Arabian Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Israel.
And Dana Bash actually holds Lindsey Graham accountable for his meeting with the Saudi crown prince there after saying he would never meet with him after Saudi Arabia did the barbaric killing of Jamal Khashoggi. And he did a flip-flop on that, and he's been cross-examined on that by multiple anchors, but they don't seem to do a good job on the abortion issue. I pretty much pre-criticized that clip, but one other thing he said in there that's not true. He likes to use this talking point about how allowing late-term abortions puts us with North Korea and China or whatever, and Europe has earlier limits. And it's true that a lot of European countries have earlier limits, but there are exceptions that allow abortions after those earlier week limits are much more extensive than anything Lindsey Graham ever put. They have limits for the mental health of the mother. Some countries have have exceptions for mental health of the mother, or exceptions for economic reasons. Those are never exceptions that you hear from Republicans like Lindsey Graham, but you see those exceptions in a lot of European countries where there are limits on abortions in the 15-week range or whatever. But anyway, that was the final Newsmaker clip, and I hope you enjoyed the program I put together, all the clips I picked out, my added political commentary and media criticism. I appreciate all of the live viewers who showed up to keep me company. I've been reading your comments along the way, and also, if you are watching the recorded show and you want to argue with me about anything I said in this live stream, I'll probably have time sometime this week to argue with people who disagree with me. If you're a recorded show viewer, I will give you at least one reply. I can't promise to like keep replying forever after I've already won the argument. That's happened like recently in some recorded show viewer comment arguments where like I won the argument and then they like keep arguing. Why is that happening? But anyway, speaking of which, I seem to be missing like one of my regular trolls is, or I guess that's a pejorative. One of my regular contrary viewers is not in the live stream. I wonder if I like won that argument on the Second Amendment at the end of last week's show and drove him, her, or them off. I don't really know the correct pronoun there, but or maybe that viewer will show up in the recorded show comments. Anyway, I will keep doing this show every Monday through the 2024 election cycle, which, as I mentioned last week, goes all the way through January 26, 2025, because that's part of our election cycle now. We have to see, like, is the vote actually going to get certified by the Congress on January 6, 2025, before we even know how it's going to turn out. But anyway, maybe I'll have some other reason to upload a video between now and next Monday. But otherwise, thanks for joining me. And until next week, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.